Salutation shades, and welcome back to One Candle Society for another One Candle Paranormal Case File. Here with your host Vic Waitley
and Marcus D. And guys, it's been a nice, awesome, long month as we've been talking on our podcast, Talking with Shadows, about all things immortality. And today we decided to do the granddaddy story of them all as we picked a fantastic case file for you guys today.
Now come away with us as we travel through the annals of history, trying to chase down the elusive Count of Saint Germain.
The mystery of Saint Germain begins, well, with another mystery. It's unknown exactly where, even when, the Count of Saint Germain was born. Some scholars claim that he was the illegitimate son of Francis Ragoczy II, Prince of Transylvania in 1690. Others claim that he was born in 1710 in the village of Saint Germain in southern Italy. Others claim that he may have even been born somewhere far east of Europe itself. Although his place of birth and even his real name is disputed, what isn't disputed is this very real man captivated numerous royal courts across the world during the 18th century. The Count of Saint Germain was an influential member of royal courts in Persia, France, Russia, and even Germany. He spoke numerous languages, wrote dozens of musical composition, but what he was most known for was being an incredibly accomplished alchemist. The Count of Saint Germain was one of the few alchemists believed to have actually created an elixir of immortality. Numerous personal diaries of nobles in the 18th century state having known the Count of Saint Germain for years, but he never appeared any older than 40. In fact, the Count of Saint Germain often boasted about his longevity, claiming he was much older than people realized. Several of his closest friends revealed that Saint Germain claimed that he was sometimes 100, 300, or even far more ancient than that. Even after his supposed death on February 27, 1784, several people have come forward claiming that Saint Germain still walks the earth to this day, appearing frequently throughout major historical moments. Many claim that Saint Germain is still hiding in the shadows, pulling the strings from the dark. Just a few sightings of Saint Germain include, well, during the French Revolution, the 1930s, which sparked an entire faith around him, or even in the 1970s when a man came forward claiming to be him, performing alchemical feats such as turning lead into gold on live television. Although there's much we don't know about who the Count of Saint Germain was, no one can doubt the impact that he had on the rest of us.
Okay, let's see. There's a lot of areas we can go with Saint Germain. What are you thinking first?
Alright, this guy just has so many different facets about himself that I think that we could cover. I think the first thing that we should talk about is like Saint Germain, the party guy. I mean, this guy impressed so many royal courts all over Europe and even further away than that.
Oh yeah, he would walk into a court in Prussia and just be the guy there in the gray cloak where everyone else is wearing these incredibly fancy outfits. And first he stands out because, well, he's really not that dressed up. But then people would kind of migrate towards him and realize, oh hey, this guy who's wearing essentially peasant clothes has shoes covered with thousands of diamonds.
I love it. It's like he picked up a bedazzler and just went to town like all over himself. I mean, this guy easily attracts just so many people's attention in any room that he goes into.
It's not just the way he dresses in his odd affect. He was a man of incredible charisma and talent.
Yeah. Voltaire himself even said that this is a man who knows everything and lives forever. This is Voltaire. His job is to rip people apart on how stupid they are. And he says this guy knows everything.
I actually love Voltaire's writing.
like seriously, like this is his whole job is to just shred conformists, like people like Confucius and things like that, and works like that. And he loves the Count of Saint Germain.
Well, he's an incredibly unique and talented guy. This guy made a massive impact pretty much everywhere he went. But wow, a lot of people always remarked on how odd he dressed. It was usually really just very plain clothing with one standout object, like this object that no one else in the country could possibly have possessed.
I think that is part of his appeal, and one of the things you have to understand about like the 18th century, like just medieval Europe, and even like the rest of the world, things royalty did was they collected eccentric people like this. So if your sort of thing that you do to sort of like live and you want to like hobnob around these people, you have to be that guy, that thing that people want to collect. It's like Harry Potter. It's like the sixth Harry Potter, like the Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, like with that professor. Like he needs to be collected. That's what he has to do. He has to have something about him that makes him stand out if he wants to be in these courts.
And he would make a long-lasting impact with these individuals. There were plenty of stories where the Count of Saint Germain would be announced, and someone would go, "Oh, I once knew a Count of Saint Germain in my youth. I should go meet them," and then show up and realize, this is the same guy. This is the same guy I knew from 30 years ago who showed up in court, but he looks like he hasn't aged a day. In many cases, they said he even looked younger than he did when they met them 40 years ago.
There was a famous, I think she was a famous French noblewoman that heard that Saint Germain was in town, went to go visit him, thought he was like the son of like his father that she may have knew. Maybe he's Saint Germain Jr. And he's like, "No, madam, I'm the same person." And like, she's like, "You should be like 70. Like, I did the math on this. Like, when he supposedly met her, she thought he was 40. This is like 30 years later. This would be like walking in and seeing like your grandpa looking like to be like the same age as you." I think the next thing that we should talk about is his alchemy, right? Saint Germain. The reason why a lot of people believe that he is immortal is because he was a very accomplished alchemist. Everywhere he went, he would stay in a court. He brought a laboratory with him and would do these just bizarre alchemical feats for the royals of the court that he was in.
Yeah, much of his alchemy is understood through results. Like, for example, him possessing some of these objects that there was no reason for him to possibly possess, like shoes with thousands of diamonds on them. And some people say tens of thousands of diamonds on them. He always had these incredible precious jewels in huge quantities that no one should realistically possess. Beyond that, they were always said to be of like a color and clarity that was almost impossible for the stone to naturally possess. And while we're on the subject of color and clarity, another odd thing he'd have, and this baffled painters of the time period, is when he painted, whatever he was using for paint was clearly very different from what everyone else in Europe was. A group of painters at the time would examine his painting and say, "We cannot produce these colors he has here. We cannot do this. We have to understand how he is making paints with these vibrant, deep colors," which was really something Europe could not do at the time period.
Something that, well, I'm going to speak to that first. The thing that I want to speak to that at first is I think a partial way to explain that could be how well traversed he was. Because this is a guy that was not only in Western Europe. When you research the Count of Saint Germain, you get a lot of his accounts throughout, like his travels within Western and Eastern Europe, for sure. The story always begins, though, with him coming even from the Far East when he's a member of the court of the Shah, like in Persia and stuff. And it's even known that he traveled to like Asian countries as well, because he was known to speak a couple like Asian languages. So I'm wondering if in his travels in the Middle East and even in the Far East that he was just able to pick up some of the recipes that like people in the West wouldn't be able to do.
I think that's a good possibility, but let me offer a counter theory. He was alchemically creating gems and smashing them down for paint.
Okay,
this is actually something that you can do is you can make paint out of gems. It's you can, like, people use this technique today. It's just incredibly expensive. But if you have this laboratory where you're just cranking out sapphires, maybe turn them into dust and make the best blue paint anyone's ever seen.
That's been a weird thing as we've been studying like stuff in the Paranormal, just the bizarre experiments people did with precious gems. Like, I remember we were doing like a alchemical it was something on recipes for the cure for diseases and stuff, and one of them being crushed emeralds that people would eat. Like, I really want to know, just are you not some sort of like mystical alchemist to get all of like access to this much money just to experiment with that many gemstones?
In Ficino's letters to the Medici, he, like, half of the physical, like, remedies he gives, okay, half is a bit of hyperbole, but often he recommends, oh, you guys should eat gold. Just eat gold. Eat lots of gold. Just a little bit for breakfast, a little bit for lunch. Just make sure you're eating it. It's
like going to your doctor's office and saying, I have a stomach ache. And it's like, okay, I'm going to prescribe you, to eat a bowl of gold rings. Take this to your local pharmacy. Like, oh, your insurance doesn't cover it. I'm so sorry. What? Like, that's a shock.
Well, I think it's more like their gold leafing chocolate, but yeah, pretty much. Another interesting one is his work for the Russian Navy. Like, this was during a time period where it was extremely hot. More people were being lost in battles due to heat exhaustion.
Before we slip into that point, not too far, but one thing that I'm going to bring back up about how alchemically maybe he had to have been creating these things. Like, upon his deathbed, and even like throughout the time that people knew him, nobody really knew where he kept his money. So this is a guy that's traveling around with all sorts of like vast amounts of gems. In order to do that, you're going to have to be able to keep this money somewhere. It's not like you're just going to be carrying crates and crates of money. How do you do that? How do you hide that much money?
I think he doesn't travel with money. I think he gets to town, sets up his alchemy lab, and somehow starts cranking out diamonds.
Okay, so I just wanted to speak on that. I just wanted to speak on that and just throw that out there as a point for people trying to say that maybe his alchemical was mundane, like was explainable and not, supernatural. But as you were saying about it,
if it's explainable, it's in that realm where that old saying, if science is sufficiently advanced, it's indistinguishable from magic. It would have to be in that sort of realm for what this guy's doing. But okay, back to Russia. So the Russian Navy's losing more people to heat exhaustion than they are to, like, the shot from their enemies. So he's contracted in to find a way to fix this. So he just cranks out this magical potion. And it's supposed to keep them cool, keep them hydrated and stuff like that. He basically created Gatorade. And they started using it, and sure enough, they stopped losing people to heat exhaustion, and they start winning battles.
Do you think they had, like, Mystic Mountain Blueberry, or, like, Fruit Punch, or, like, the really crappy yellow one?
I haven't... Okay, first, the yellow one's the best one. Shut up.
No, it is not the best one.
Yes, it is. You're just wrong. But I haven't found anything that gives a whole lot of details on what exactly this elixir is. But they were so impressed by it, they made him a general and gave him a title. And if I remember, he picked something really silly like, a General Weldon, because he could pick his general title, so he's just General Weldon. And he just showed up and did this scientific miracle, or biological miracle, I don't know what you want to call it, and then, more or less, he ended up just kind of leaving with very little fanfare. Another thing is, a group of tanners remarked about how he could remove the stink out of leather and the stink out of inks through some sort of just unknown means. Because
that's easy. So you just got to put like a little bit of perfume on it. Like that's how hard could that be? You spray that with some Axe body spray, you're good.
No. Because ink at that time, it's primarily soot. It's going to smell not great. But he could somehow make it smell fine. It's not that he changed the scent, he removed the bad odor from it. And like in tanneries at this time period, the way you tan leather is dipping them in poop water. And he had a technique to just take out the smell from them. And this just, people were like, but how? Like there were merchant guilds being like, hey, we have to steal this technique from him because we would corner the market in no time.
So far, we've been able to prove that the Count of Saint Germain was the first to create both Gatorade and Febreze.
I mean, maybe for this time period, these are wonders. These are miracles. It's like I'm trying to think of like a good comparison. Oh, like he just shows up at IBM and goes, "Oh, Here's this thing. It'll make computers not get hot anymore. No, you don't have to worry about cooling systems anymore. They just won't get hot anymore.
Like how revolutionary this guy can be when he shows up into places.
There's one more thing as far as his alchemical feats that I want to talk about. And I believe it was in Spain, where the king had a favored jeweled ring. It was a special heirloom of his, and it was his favorite piece of the royal jewelry. And it had a chip in it. And Saint Germain was asked, could you fix this gem? And he says, yes, certainly I can. It's going to take a while, but I can do it. And he takes it and he disappears for a year with this royal ring. And then he returns it, not replaced, but the gem being somehow healed. Somehow the gem was now complete and reformed. And this was something that baffled the king for the rest of his life. Like, how could this have been done? And he just ended up keeping it.
Like, is it possible, though, that he just had the ability to be able to cut gems with a knowledge better than, like, European contemporaries knew at the time?
It's possible, but if he knows how to create gems...
Well, that's true.
I feel like he would also know how to effectively fill the chip. But maybe he was just very good at reproducing it, and it was such a good reproduction that the king couldn't tell the difference.
Well, I think that even could speak... If you look at it from like a supernatural aspect too, I think that takes it an even step further than stories of people transmuting like lead into gold. Because like I think even when you think about people that supposedly could do that, again, you're not getting like perfectly cut bricks of gold or gems of something. You know, you're not shaping the object itself. Like it seems like he even has a mastery of being able to shape the gem or the gold and things that he can transmute.
I mean, wherever he went, no matter what he was doing, the man was considered a miracle.
Not only was he just a super accomplished alchemist, but he was also like an incredibly accomplished statesman as well. I mean, he's a member of royal courts all throughout Europe, and he's a trusted person by many of these royal people, and is often used in many of the political dealings that go down in Europe throughout the 18th century.
And the sheer people that he would have met, like Catherine the Great, he had interactions with. During his time in Prussia and Austria, there's a very good chance that he met Otto von Bismarck.
This guy was often used by even kings and queens. Like he found himself often just in royal courts during very particular sensitive moments of European history. We don't even really know about like Middle Eastern and Eastern history. Like we can only really speak to this, and this is going to even play in a little bit later in the episode when we start talking. Like in the 1740s, he was sent by Louis XV to England for secret missions. Like he was arrested by the English.
And the amazing thing is he got cut, and he talks his way out.
Yeah, he's like, oh, yes, officer. I have these secret mission orders from the King Louis, but I'm not the immortal you're looking for.
Like he had correspondence letters from the Jacobin, didn't he? Mm-hmm. This is a major revolution they're trying to put down in England. This is like, oh yeah, I was caught with correspondence with terrorist organizations, but I didn't know they were there. Those weren't mine. And then somehow he being let go.
Like this is stuff that they would just immediately walk you to a lamppost and hang you for.
Yeah, and they were not shy about executions during this time period. And this man just talks his way out.
The weird, and another thing that just baffles me, and I want this noted, guys, because again, we're gonna get this to a little bit later in the episode when I have my biggest issue with this story. Like my biggest thing that just wraps my mind about. The dude's arrested. There's actual like official like English paperwork where this dude's arrested, and we still don't know this guy's name. His name goes on a police report, and he talks his way out of it, and we still don't know the Count of Saint Germain's real name.
Yeah, there's letters written about how he acted during this time, what his demeanor's like, but not his full name.
And we're gonna come back to this. We're gonna come back to this because I don't want to touch on because there's a lot more about him as a statesman that people don't even that we want to get to first. Like you were talking about him like ascending to like being around for Catherine the Great. Like he's actually like in Russia in like 1762, like when Catherine the Great is rising to power. He is in there at the time due to the conspiracy of her rising to power.
Which is a crazy, chaotic time period in Russia. Like the ascent of Catherine the Great was a real wild ride.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know, on the supposed death day that he day that he died. Prior to that, like there was turmoil in France. Like we talked about, like him being like really in like close to King Louis, like in the 18th, like during this time period. He's actually in the French court during this time, warning them of the pending revolution that's going on. I mean, it's really not like most like world leaders don't like understand like whenever there's revolution happen. Like they know like when tensions are not okay. They know when things are bad. They're having to handle issues. Like the guys in France warning the king and queen of France at the time that revolution is coming.
Yeah, but he's not just saying that it's going to be revolution. He has this amazing insight to what it's going to be like. Europe at this time had not seen a revolution quite like the French Revolution. It was something that was a bit unique. And he understood that. He understood how extreme this was going to be, what the national debt was going to be like afterwards. And he basically all but mentioned the national razor, the guillotine. This guy's insight is extreme. Mm-hmm. But we'll get to that more here in a bit.
Oh, absolutely. And again, we talked about him being in France during the tension part right before the French Revolution. An important note, again, talking about him being seen during very tense political moments in European history. In 1789, a famous woman that was in there, the Comtesse de Ademar, commented that she saw the what? I don't know.
I think it's Ademar.
Oh, Ademar. Sorry, I misspoke on that. I apologize.
That might be wrong.
1789. Saint Germain is in France during the French Revolution, and the Comtesse de Ademar said that she had lengthy conversations with Saint Germain again about the coming and goings of the French Revolution at the time. Do you know why that's particularly interesting, Mr. Vic?
No, what in particular?
Because he's officially dead in 1784.
Oh yeah, okay. I did want to divert and talk about this.
He's supposed to be dead.
That death, I think he had to have just staged his death.
Yeah.
I think he just had to at that point because people were noticing how long he'd been around. Yeah. And there's so much suspicion over that death. He chokes on some food and just dies. Yeah. And then his friend burns all of his documents. Like, I really feel like his friend was just helping him stage his death.
Yeah. Oh, God. And even, like during his death, too. Like, we'll talk about, like, his death. Like, his whole estate. Again, the dude's been seen with just bazillions of gems. Like, and just seems to have this just massive wealth. Nobody knows where it went. It just poofed. It just went up in smoke. And nobody has any idea where his fortune went.
Have you ever noticed that often when he pops up as a statesman, it's in a period where everything has the potential to just come crashing down around people. Like, just two examples. The ascension of Catherine the Great is almost a comedy of errors. There are so many places where this could have entirely fallen apart. There are so many times that Catherine rolled the dice and got exactly what she needed in very chancy situations. And it makes me wonder if that luck could have been Saint Germain's hand in action, or the discussions between Prussia and Austria. That could have blown up so bad. That could have blown up so hard, and there would not be a Germany. Like, it very easily could have just come crashing down around all the people who were barely trying to hold this situation together. And once again, the great people of the time cast the die and kept getting what they needed to hold their nations together, to keep them from falling around them.
I do have a thought on him as a statesman, but I'm going to save it for our final thoughts.
Oh, you're holding me in suspense now.
Oh, no, I know. Because it's going to be my final thought on what I think Saint Germain actually is. But let's move on to Saint Germain the Prophet. The idea of him being able to foretell the future and knowing, like, where things may be going bad. Or the idea of him coming here to give us enlightenment.
Like, he was clearly a man of incredible talent and insight. But some of the things that he pulls off in his predictions require more than just insight. He's able to pull off, like, mainly going to the French Revolution again. The details he gave are of incredible just foresight. Like, even knowing he's a member of, and I know we haven't really touched on this, he's a member of several secret societies and things like that. He probably knew to a certain extent the plans that were being put in motion by these secret societies assisting the revolution. But even with that knowledge, there's no way he could have known some of the things that happened. He couldn't look back on previous revolutions as soon as they go that way, because this revolution went in a unique direction.
Okay, skeptic argument here for a minute. So, I mean, I think a little bit you glossed over, we're talking about secret societies. I mean, the secret societies this guy was alleged to have been a part of, like the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Society of Asiatic Brothers, the Knights of the Light, the Illuminati, and the Order of the Templars. Like, these are some very, like, high, like, fingers on the pulse, like, global macro level movers and shakers at the time of the 1800s. I mean, if he legit is a member of all of these, I think this dude might actually have his finger on the pulse of knowing when things are about to go down. Because again, the thing that governments do is regular people, we have 5-year plans. Have you guys ever heard that term? Like, we got 5-year plans. Governments have 30-year plans, 50-year plans. They're thinking of longevity. If he's a member of these groups, then I think he might have a lot more knowledge than what we give him credit for where things are going.
Yeah, but still, how could he have pulled off with such detail the rise of French Revolution, considering it had gone in a direction that revolutions in Europe had not previously gone?
He might not have known how violent they were going to be, but I mean, again, nobody was shocked when the French Revolution finally kicked off. Nobody was shocked when the American Revolution finally kicked off.
Yeah, but the direction that the revolution went was unique for the time. I'd really think that takes more than just good insight and good connections.
True. He also knew when to not be there when it started.
Oh yeah. I think he was pretty sure he would probably also get the national razor.
Keep in mind, he was in France to warn, hey, this might be coming, because again, he's in the court of Louis and Marie Antoinette's court. Again, if he's found there, he's like, they're looking kind of murdery over there.
Yeah, and
I'm gonna get out. And even when he pops back up, he doesn't even pop back up until the midst of the French Revolution, when he's no longer a member of the court.
Yeah, and he really did everything he could to grab the steering wheel of France and steer it away from this obvious tragedy. Mm-hmm. And it's just said that he was unsuccessful in this matter. I really couldn't think of much more he could have done in this situation, but he seemed like he really, really was trying to steer it away.
Well, yeah, because he's a member of a royal court, and he's losing his status. I mean, if the French Revolution kicks off and you replace it with a peasant mob, they're not going to appoint they're not going to appoint people like him back in a position of power. He loses it if he does. I don't know. I don't necessarily think it was a very altruistic thing, the reason why he may have been trying to do that.
Although I think that he was an enemy to an extent of certain secret societies.
I believe that.
Especially the Illuminati and the Cult of Reason at the time. Because Robespierre, one of the head people, movers and shakers in the French Revolution, was really steering the country away from traditional religion and into this very Illuminati-esque cult of reason, and then evolved into later even more bizarre machinations approaching Robespierre's death. But it seemed to be one of the things that he was hardcore trying to steer the country away from.
Well, because again, but again, the reason this could be is if he is a charlatan, where it's just all smoke and mirrors, he is the Wizard of Oz, he got his clout from being this mystic. Everything that is going to bring about in France, which could spread to the rest of Europe, is a threat to his way of life. So I don't necessarily think it was entirely altruistic for the reason why he did that.
I'm not totally sure it would threaten his mystic aspect, because he could easily just frame it as, oh, this is just incredibly advanced science. But I think you were right earlier when you were saying this threatens his way of life, because I think he likes, to an extent, the court culture. That seems to be where he gains his strength, how he gains his clout.
Yep. And again, for the reason why that's so important to him, we're going to get there. But again, we jumped off him as a prophet so hardcore there. We did.
Well, these are the ramifications of him as a prophet. I know,
we did that. But something that I don't think a lot of people know about the Count of Saint Germain, at least when I was researching this, did you guys know that there's a whole religion, I'm not going to so far call it a cult yet, that's dedicated to this guy, that's in Illinois? It's 5 hours from where we're recording right now. There is an actual religion dedicated to the Count of Saint Germain that I found. You can go get their material, their literature online. They according to them, this guy appeared to, it was in 1932. Mr. and Mrs. Guy Ballard are in the Mount Shasta in California, and they say that the Count of Saint Germain appears to them and gives them all of this wisdom and spiritual guidance, and they found a whole religion on him. In their faith, he's this ascended master.
So much weird stuff happens around Mount Shasta.
I know, they go out there and they say it appears to him, and he's come down as this ascended master to essentially enlighten humanity and give us reason and guidance. A lot of it being about, there was a lot of talk about self-confidence, a lot of seeing that inner light within yourself.
I got a pretty solid Aetherius Society vibe off the whole thing. Do you get that as well?
I did too. I did too. If you guys want to catch see that video that I did with Ellie Waitley, Vic's wife, check that video out. It's that where they essentially channeled this guy, but just replaced their guy with Saint Germain. And these guys popped up 20 years before.
Didn't they use the term Ascendant Master as well?
Oh yeah, this term is used a lot within that type of faith. There's this whole idea of that there are people like the Count of Saint Germain, these immortal beings, Jesus, Buddha, whoever, that essentially come to humanity to guide us in a right spiritual direction. Usually for the positive.
I would say he's a force of stability. Mm-hmm. Good or bad, he's a force for stability for the most part. Yep. But I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like deep down, this man is executing incredible awareness of the world around him, or do you think he is expressing supernatural awareness of the world around him? Even considering that this guy may likely have had lots of time to live and experience.
I would say that if it's not supernatural, that it may not be supernatural in the sense of unhuman, but it may be to the point where he's the apex hobnobber. People that were similar to him, that could do that similar statesman-esque function. Think founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin,
Bismarck.
These are all people that sort of had a base of operations, a general location where they were able to be, and then they would leave from there. They had a home base, and they would go to other places and try to influence courts. This guy seemed to literally just be a traveling rich vagabond that seemed to be able to hobnob in courts. I mean, if it's not a superhuman ability, then this dude's the gold standard. He's the 10 for hobnobbing.
I think if he does possess paranormal capability of defining the future, which I think is likely, just because of some of the details he was able to come up with, I don't think it's a perfect sight of the future. Because if he could see the future exactly as it will be, why go to France? Why try to turn that steering wheel? I think that what he can see is more likely possibilities of what is to come. That's why he would be there fighting so hard. If he saw the exact future, he would. Okay. Why go there in the first place?
Okay. So then this is going to lead me into the point that the question that I want to know. You guys have heard all of the stuff that we've talked about of how influential this guy was, but throughout the entire story, we've called him the Count of Saint Germain because nobody knows who this guy really is. It's debated. there's different theories about what his real name could be. I've heard Simon Wolf. I've heard Amar. I've heard it pronounced two different ways, but no one really knowing what his actual name is. The dude's got dozens of musical compositions that are
some of them are in the Museum of London, I believe.
Yeah, he's got 2 manuscripts that are attributed to this guy. He's been arrested. Even his gravestone says the Count of Saint Germain. Doesn't even have his real name. His estate, all of it had Count of Saint Germain. No real name.
Which does make some sense. If you had a noble title, that is what people would call you by. But to this extent, it becomes anomalous.
Mm-hmm. And I think the reason why, something that people don't understand is in this time period, your title trumped your name. It trumped everything. You know, people would call you the Count of something. Like, that was just so important. Another thing that you could do, too, was you could buy titles. Like, this is something you can do from people. This is something, like, how that nobles made money, you know. Like, they would, you know, if they needed something, they would just sell. They could sell their title to somebody, and you could, like, legit buy this. And, again, nobody knows where this guy is from. The theory that I think of really what happened to this guy is I think this is a guy that's either an illegitimate child of some person in royal court, so his real name can't be known because it could affect it could have a devastating impact on royal courts, or he's essentially a pauper playing prince, where he buys a noble title, but he can't tell people what it is. Now, keep in mind, during this time period, one of the, you know how like rich people collect cars now? What royalty did back then was they collected people. You collected very famous people or eccentric people that are in your court. If it was found out that the King of France was tricked by just some random guy who lied his way into court, that would be so embarrassing. Like, kings and queens would kill to keep that from coming out, to avoid that embarrassment for themselves. So it's very possible that the royalty, to keep this guy in their court, probably had to propagate the lie of what this guy, or keep hidden what his real name was.
There's one thing I do want to address before because I feel like we're heading into our conclusions. Mm-hmm. I feel like we're moving in that direction, and there's something that we haven't talked about yet. Mm-hmm. One is some of the odd behavior that he exhibited.
Oh, yeah.
For example, at one point when someone saw him and recognized him as being someone that they had known like 30, 40 years ago, the older woman shrieks and says, "You must be the devil." And he just kind of freezes. In one account, he just kind of full body locks up at that point. In another account of it, he starts twitching and spasming at that point. After a few moments, he regains composure and says something along the lines of, "Do not call me such base things," and then flees the party.
Yeah, he's a weird guy. Again, the dude's a super socialite, and he's always spending time with friends and other people in court. But it's also noted that he's never seen eating at any of these parties. Like, he doesn't eat. Except maybe either is only known to only eat oatmeal, or that's what he said, is he only ate oatmeal or something like that, is what he says.
Another thing that struck me as being very strange, and this is going back to the Countess Adamar. Mm-hmm. When she was being told that she's about to receive a visitor because he was coming at an odd hour for her. Her attendant said, "I'm surprised. I thought this man would have been worn as a mantle by the devil by now." And occasionally terms like that will pop up around Saint Germain, where I can't point to anything specifically wicked he's done, but the people when they're talking about him are often concluding that there's this wickedness to it. So I almost wonder if there's a piece missing from the historical record, some dark aspect of him that just we're not getting.
And I think that's a good thing to lead us into our final thoughts. Yeah. So my final thoughts on the Count of Saint Germain. Do you know what the term a cooler is?
A cool or no.
Okay, so this is doing like a myth or legend that people have used throughout like casinos or like in the gambling world.
I do know what this is.
Where a person has such bad luck or they are such a centerpiece of entropy that bad things tend to follow them like around. What if what the Count of Saint Germain is he's that? And what the reason why he travels so much is he's not trying to be in the court of where he's going. Like, he's not wanting to go there himself. He's being sent there because he often ends up in places and then there's a radical regime change shortly thereafter. And he would be able to know this if he is aware of this. He's in France hanging out, and then the French Revolution kicks off. He's in Russia during the rise of Catherine the Great, during the fall of that. He's sent by the King of France to England during this time period as well to shake things up. What if that's what's going on? And he's this sort of pawn by the royalty of Europe to literally try to oust somebody or to change things up. And that's what's going on. That would definitely be a reason as to why you would not want to know this guy's real name or why it is, and also why he would have to be so charismatic, because it's his job to get in there. It's one of the things he has to do.
That's a really interesting theory, because the thing is, like, you took... At first I'm like, no, this can't be, but the more I think about it, it does make some sense, because the way I was looking at it is he's more of a force of stability, because these changes that occurred ended up for the better. Like, the changes in Austria, the changes in Russia, like the ascension of Catherine the Great removed an incredibly ineffective man for the throne. But the thing is, there's still a side that loses in those. And I can see what you're saying now. I can see what you're meaning. I'm not sold, but I'm following.
And keep in mind, remember, the stability of one nation often means the stability of another nation. So if you're like right now, think of like the government of the United States. If our market crashed, how awful that would be worldwide. Like how catastrophic that would be if the U.S. dollar just suddenly tanked. Many countries definitely have a vested interest in the United States being this economic, doing well. And during the Western Europe,
I couldn't quite hear you.
Sorry. Many countries are heavily invested in the United States doing well. So during the 18th century, it probably would behoove many countries to want to see some other countries do good. If they saw another leader as a threat, they would send Saint Germain, a change would occur, and it benefits everybody all around.
No, I like it.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, not sold, but I like it. I think that this is someone who traveled a great deal and learned secrets from a lot of different places. And he will say in multiple conversations, when people ask, where have you come from? He'll say the East. I almost wonder if he traveled to China, perfected the arts of the Taoist of mortals, used that extended lifetime to just generate incredible amounts of experience, and then just basically traveled around trying to maintain his life at that point. Trying to maintain stability because stability benefited him. He had this, I feel like he had to have had some form of oracular capability, because so many times he arrived at just the right moment, and during those moments where he's around, things just go in the direction they need to increase that stability. And I feel like he goes beyond just being very good at analyzing the situation. Beyond that, he had to have had an incredibly advanced knowledge of science and alchemy. I cannot explain everything he does, but some of it is scientifically explainable. Like the conversations of Gatorade and Febreze. These wouldn't be miracles nowadays, but back then they definitely would be. And there are things that he did that would still be considered miracles to this day. If not that route, the other route, I kind of want to go vampire on this guy. I kind of do. I mean, from Transylvania, not eating in public, some of his weird freakouts. I kind of want to go in the vampire direction, but I think it's not as strong of a direction as this guy being effectively one of those rare people who perfected the art of immortality through some form of either spiritual enlightenment or alchemy, and then utilizing that knowledge to grant the world stability. I do believe that he was definitely a supporter of the royal regimes at the time. He seemed to have been a big supporter of monarchies and things like that. But ultimately, he seemed to have been trying to increase stability in the European world. I would say the guy's a force for good. The exact means he gained such bizarre abilities is well beyond me. Trust me, if I knew how he got them, I'd go get them myself. But incredibly, incredibly fascinating guy.
But leave your thoughts on the Count of Saint Germain in the comments below.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video on the Count of Saint Germain. It's been a real ride this month just studying immortality and all the implications of it. And I really think that the Count of Saint Germain is the best example of it.
Yeah, it was such just a fantastic story. I know there was even more that we could have talked about on the Count of Saint Germain, but it's just such a rich story, and it was so much fun to be able to take all of the stuff that we've talked about, immortality, and bring it to you with probably, again, like what Vic said, the best case of it that we've been able to find. You know, we hope that you guys enjoyed it. Please let us know in the comments below what you guys thought of this episode. If you liked it, don't forget to like, subscribe, but also don't forget, hit that notification bell so that way you guys get up to date anytime that we put out a new video.
And a big thank you to all of our patrons that allow us to make these videos for you guys.
Yeah, we love you guys so much. Definitely have some fantastic content over on our Patreon that you guys can go and check out. We have extended episodes of our podcast. We have bonus videos that we put up just for our patrons. You guys can go over there and check all that stuff out.
And you guys get to vote on the monthly topic.
Absolutely. There is still time if you're listening to this in the month of January to see what we're going to be doing for the theme of our month in February. So just go over and sign up to be a patron and let your voice be heard.
What's the patron level you have to be at to vote?
I believe it's the $2, for as little as $2 a month, you guys get to vote in the poll that we have put up. But until next time, guys, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.